Hello everybody, Andy here, and today I want to talk to you about the recent Tacoma Open from the United States, which is a GW run tournament. We don't get too many of them, so I think it's worth covering them, especially when they're as big as this one. It was 63 players. Interestingly, it was supposed to be capped like 48, but it managed to go to 63, which is cool. Okay, it was 63 players, 6 rounds. One undefeated winner, who was Matt Wilhelm, running Intercession. So pretty interesting, all things considered. And I thought I'd go down kind of all of our stats on it and discuss why. There were 6 below him who all took 1 loss, so 1 winner, then 6 below, and then from 8th and down, you got multiple losses. So 6 below him all took 1 loss, and kind of in descending order they were Phobos, Hand of the Archon, Intercession, Void Dancers, Commandos, Felgor, Ravagers. So that does mean in the top 8 we had 2 Intercession, you know, which is actually very worthy of note, but we'll dive into that, not to worry. So the big questions for me are, where were the cults, right? What were the Chaos Cultists up to? What about the Felgor Ravagers? Where are Pathfinders? Which factions in a 63-player tournament didn't turn up? What was the terrain like, and are there any hot Intercession tips? But of course, before we do that, I would like to say that if you are a subscriber to my channel, I'd like to give you a big double hello. Wow, wasn't that wholesome? Hey, we all need some pleasantries in our life, and I've got to be honest, the double pleasantry thing, the circle hello, it's been working for me. But maybe we don't need to be pleasant, we need to be polite. So what do you think? Double hello or hashtag polite gang? What do you think? Let me know. Drop a comment, but that is still a subscriber only benefit, so like, subscribe, leave a comment right now. If you really like what I'm doing here, consider checking out my Patreon, my Discord, all that good stuff. And a minor side note, all of this stuff here has nothing, and like all of this crap behind me and here has absolutely nothing to do with this video. I pressed the wrong button. Whoops. It's just, I've got a lot of stuff on the table. I've got a lot of things on the go, a lot of fingers in pies, pots on the stove, plates on the sticks. You'll know how it be. Anyway, back to the Tacoma Open. Let's dive in, shall we? Firstly, so where am I getting all of these? Oh, well, hold on, I've got some imagery, hold up. Boom. Here we go. I thought I'd show you the top 8 so that you can actually see it yourself. You know, get those stars names up in the lights, right? What am I saying? Anyway, so right, let's start with where am I getting these? BCP. In case you don't know and you want to look at all of these wins, yourself, there is an app called BCP, which is Best Coast Pairings. It's not a very good app, but in true GW fashion, it's the one they've decided to go with. So what can you do, right? Fine. You can look at all of these. There are some limits. I pay to be as like a subscribed member for it, which means that I can look at things regardless of timeline. I think if you don't pay, then you can only look like a week earlier. I don't know. Anyway, you can see all 63 placements for yourself, but I'm going to go over the hottest ones right now. So one of the questions was, and I'm sure we're all asking, where are the Chaos Cultists? 8th, actually. So they came 8th. So obviously this one only goes down to 7th. Why? Just that's the width, that's the length of my screen. There was no reason I cut it off at 7. But also, as mentioned, once you get to the 8th player, they are then having more than a single loss. So this, to me, is the podium. The top 7 in this particular instance, which is pretty interesting. They came 8th as they got, and why did they come 8th? What beat them? Well, they got a draw into Felgor and a loss into Commandos. And I've got to be honest, both of those make sense. I think Felgor pretty strong into cults, and we all know that Commandos seem to have one of the strongest matchups, obviously using the term strongest loosely there. Everything's relative into cults, so that makes sense, yeah. 6th we see there. Quick note on 6th, he's over here, lovely. Yep. 6th is, now I'm not sure, but I think that Commandos player is, for those of you from the old school, from the previous edition, I think that's Necron Chuck, which is just something to note. There you go. Anyway, moving on. Right, the top, I'm just going to rattle off a few interesting placements now. So the top Inquisition player came 16th. So that's interesting. Inquisition, I think they're pretty strong, but 16th isn't like, well, it's not podiuming, obviously. Gellerpox, 22nd. Again, Gellerpox are generally quite consistently posting, 60% plus win rate, 22nd place. So the next cultists after 8th were 25th and 26th, and that was it. There were only 3 cults players. So, still good placement, still top half, but not the feared, dreaded Chaos cults, which is interesting. Obviously, we know nothing about the players, right? So it's just of note, removing player skill, that is where they ended up. The first Compendium team came 27th, and that was Custodes, obviously. Hunterclade came 15th, which is interesting. Hunterclade's an odd one. I think they're really strong, but again, it's all about who's playing them, and they do have the ability to mess up quite easily, and they probably don't have the strongest matchups into certain factions at the moment. They're not as strong as they used to be, just because there are more options on the field. And let's be honest, we are seeing more and more that Kill Team is rock, paper, scissors, which is, all of these games basically become rock, paper, scissors, so it's fine. Hyrotech Circle 28th. Again, pretty low for Hyrotech, in my estimation of how strong they actually are, but fine, whatever. Surprises me, but apparently nobody else. Warp Coven, I believe, again, 3 players, maybe 4. Their best win was 32, which actually isn't bad at all. It's almost exactly 50% there, like the halfway mark, so not bad, not bad. Pathfinders, down at 33. Now you might think, well, Andy, Pathfinders, they're not what they used to be. They're bad because of Into the Dark, and we're going to talk about terrain in a moment. I've been sent, luckily, by Jaspoon, who's actually, I don't know where he's gone, a board, and we're going to look at the terrain and consider what that might mean. And then we're going to talk about how did Pathfinders only place 33, etc., etc. But that's something to note, because obviously Pathfinders have been nerfed due to Into the Dark, and we generally still believe that Pathfinders do quite well on open, so we'll talk about that. Or I'll forget, and I won't. The first Wormblade player was down at 44th, which, again, most people say that these teams are strong on open, but are bad because of Into the Dark. So to see a team that people generally consider to be strong in this format being so low is a bit of a shame. And then our first and only Corsair player, interestingly, is 51st place, which is of note because, again, Corsairs famously, for their entire lifetime, have just straight up had a 50% win rate. So they're good, they're not winners, but they're also not losers. So being down at 51st is a toughie. And then our single, lone Kassakin Enjoyer, down at 59th. Now that's a real interesting one. I didn't actually check his win path to see who he went into, but in general, Kassakin are still ultimately a bit of a fragile team. They're exclusively shooting, really, and if they don't go into elite, like Kassakin, played well, are a gatekeeping faction for elite teams, so Intercession, Legionary, etc. If they don't go into those teams, you ain't going to be doing too well, frankly. Yeah. Oh, and then, sorry, this is my favourite fact, fact placement. The absolute legend who brings it all home for us. The only Hearthkin salvager placement, so the only guy who took Hearthkin, came last, 63rd place, and I love it because everybody's complaining about how bad Hearthkin are, and obviously the one game I played into them on my channel, they didn't do well. But it was Into the Dark, and it was really stacked against them, into Felgor, obviously. And we're all saying, well, maybe they have a bit more play on open, and last. So, there you go. Hearthkin Enjoyer tried his best, but it's a bad team. So there you go. What can you do? Interestingly, in some of his matches, he scored relatively high. This is the Hearthkin player. He scored relatively high, but obviously not enough. Like in one of his matches, he scored 17, which is like, that's a good score. That's a winning score, but obviously the opponent plays better still. So when looking at who wins, I always wonder kind of like, have they dodged their tough matchups, as I just mentioned with Kassakin? Who did they go into? I didn't even check who Hearthkin went into. It doesn't matter, they were going to lose, right? So I wonder, do they match dodge? So looking at Intercession taking first at such a big tournament, that's quite interesting. Generally, an Intercession team, they're really strong, they're really good, they're very durable, they're fast, they can melee, they can shoot, etc., etc. However, it is generally considered that although, yes, they can do all of these things well, they can do them all good, if you want to use the Americanized version of the term good and bad there, they can be outplayed. And they don't have any tricks. They do what they do, and that's it. And therefore, if you're playing a faction that can have some tricks, you can beat Intercession. However, Intercession winning, now maybe that means we need some more Kassakin in there, because as mentioned, Kassakin, pretty hard counter to the elite teams. But no, not in this instance. So, looking at Matt Wilhelm's Intercession squad matchup, he did Kroot round 1, Void Dancers round 2, Phobos round 3, Cults round 4, Hand of the Archon round 5, Phobos round 6. So interestingly, he had to play Phobos twice, Cults once. Kroot, that's fine, that's an acceptable win. We get that Void Dancers round 2. So that's a solid matchup for the Intercession there. A good Void Dancers player can win that, but it's definitely stacked against them. It's definitely in the Intercessor's favour there. Phobos? Yeah, so in general, despite the nerfs to Intercession and the buffs to Phobos, this is still generally weighted in the Intercession's favour. Phobos don't quite have what they need to both kill the Intercessor and score. They kind of can do one or the other, and if you focus on killing the Intercession player, then you can't score enough to win, obviously. Whereas if you focus on scoring, then the Intercessor player will kill you. So you kind of have to pick one. So that's a real uphill battle to win the game for the Phobos there. So Intercessor winning makes sense. Cults, obviously, we've all discussed Cults. We all know what's going on there. The fact he won was good. Nice. Hand of the Archon. Interesting. So I'm not going to talk about it because I don't know Hand of the Archon well enough. I know that a lot of people think this matchup should probably be weighted in the Hand of the Archon's favour, which I don't really understand, but other people do, so good for them. I should probably play Hand of the Archon so that I understand the matchup a bit better, but I haven't. I played them once in a multiplayer game, it was silly. Cool. So, can we learn anything from the Intercessor player? Like maybe he had some hot strats that we didn't know about, maybe he's swapped chapter tactics. What's he doing since the latest nerf? So, they still went rapid and durable in every game, which to my mind makes sense. So he's dropped methodical at all, no longer worth it. I agree with that. Maybe I misunderstood, maybe he did take Duelist into something, but I guess you don't really need it. Maybe you would take it into Cults, probably not. Maybe into Hand of the Archon, and I guess Phobos, if Phobos went super Reaver heavy, but they shouldn't do that. So, okay. Yeah, honestly, I think that durable, rapid still works. It's a good one. Apparently he took the Auspex on the Gunner every game, but kind of further mentioned that perhaps if he were to go into Void Dancers again, he'd leave it out. But ultimately he took it, but he didn't think it helped him. Why would he run Intercession? He says he likes to run Intercession because they allow you to focus on the fundamentals of gameplay, as opposed to having to think all tricksy and nuancy. You can just play the game, solid fundamentals, you will win. And that's an interesting one. Quick side note on that statement. Interesting. Because I agree, that's exactly what Intercession allows you to do. But it shouldn't, typically. So, I'm talking total balls at this point. I don't know, I wasn't there, I didn't see it, I don't know any of the players who their skill levels at the top there. However, I wouldn't be at all surprised if some of those players in the top 8 were playing more difficult games and being more tricksy and showing a higher expression of their skill level in their games, but still didn't actually perform better than Intercession. And he puts it into, you know, perfect stark contrast that the fact that they are just naturally, just in their data sheets, so good, kind of leans towards the fact that if they don't go into a hard counter, they almost always have the upper hand purely thanks to the mental load. You don't have to, you can mess up and still win. Okay, that is a strong use of the term mess up, just to clarify. I don't mean they can actually like just make mistake after mistake. I mean that they can play suboptimally. They can not put up, you know, they can be out of position, but make up for it with their speed and durability in the next turn and react strongly to what their opponent does without perfect foresight. And that's the beauty of the Intercession. But arguably, that shouldn't be how Intercession works, or if it is, their total overall power level should not allow them to podium at a 63-man tournament. Anyway, let's look at the terrain, because this might dictate a few things for us. So this was sent to me, or posted on my Discord by Jaspoon, so thank you for that. So this was run, obviously, by the Warhammer Worlds event team, the American guys. And this is a new setup that we haven't seen before, layout by them, so that's cool. And looks fine to me. Let's discuss. Right, first things first, doors were in play. That's very important to note. Well, doors and hatches, I believe, they said. So the fact that doors were in play is a good sign. I think it kind of shows that even GW themselves kind of accept that, okay, it seems like with the Octaris terrain specifically, yes, we need to have doors in there to make it a balanced game. However, with the placement of Pathfinders so low, perhaps not, if I'm honest. So I'm a big proponent that perhaps doors aren't exactly the best way forwards. To clarify, I just mean that the use of doors allow melee teams to move up the board faster and be under less threat of being shot by the enemy, okay, by a shooting team, which is fine. However, that just pushes the whole balance of the game towards melee being stronger, but I also think that melee is easier to play, so that's arguably not a good thing. However, I also fully understand that if this wasn't the case, Pathfinders would probably just continue to dominate. Not across the board. Pathfinders are strong, obviously, but they're very fragile. And that presents a bit of an interesting dilemma. At the top tables, Pathfinders on open boards, without doors, probably completely wreck them. Like the scene, the meta, sorry. But as soon as you remove the skill level and just say, you know, let's imagine everyone's a completely average player, I don't think Pathfinders are a problem at that level. But obviously, whenever we're looking at tournament stats, we are looking at probably the top players and how much and what they're doing, and that's how we discuss things. But for the average player, I think Pathfinders probably a bit weak at the moment because they're just so fragile. Anyway, what do you think of this terrain setup? Honestly, I like it. It's nice and asymmetrical. Everybody loves to say that, oh, things can't be symmetrical. So I think this is a good loadout. I haven't actually sat down and gone over sightlines to see where objectives can be seen or not seen and which side you should try and deploy on and whatnot. But just without kind of looking at it too much, this looks like a pretty decent setup considering they're trying to just use one box of Octaris terrain, so that's good. People are very critical of terrain setups, and they will look at this and say, this is a bad terrain setup. It's Planet Bowling Ball. Of course, shooting teams would have an advantage here, but they didn't. Melee teams won. Anyway, cool, done, there you go. Whew. Oh, wait, I've still got that up. No, let me move that, Okay, there you go, everybody. That's the Tacoma Open. Really interesting top 8, I've got to say. I would not have expected double Phobos up there. And no Colts. Oh, well, sorry, Colts were 8th. I mean, top 7, I guess. Wait, was there Felgor? Can't even remember who the top 8 was. Intercession, Phobos, Hand of the Archon, Intercession, Void Dancer, Commandos, Felgor. Oh, Felgor was there. Right, never mind. Never mind. Okay, interesting. What do you think? What do you think of that top 7 or top 8, whatever? Who cares? Yeah, interesting. Okay. You know what? I should have sat down and considered before I recorded why that is so unusual to see. I guess the main things of note is that there was one Kassakin player, one Pathfinders player, one Wormblade player, and none of them performed particularly well. And so when you remove some of these big hitting teams, sorry, that sounds weird to say for Kassakin, ignore that for Kassakin, but they are gatekeepers to the elites. So when you remove some of these hard counters to certain factions, you get a pretty weird top result, which I fully expect in a smaller tournament. If this was an 8-man tournament and that was the top 8, I'd be like, yeah, cool. Or even a 20-man tournament, I'd be like, okay, well, you know, they just, that was what they went up against. It is possible to match dodge, if you will. But seeing it here, I'm like, well, there really isn't a bigger expression of skill than 63 players over 2 days in 6 rounds. So these are, in my opinion, very legitimate tournament results. So, what do you think? Has Kill Team become 2 rock, paper, scissors? Maybe. Oh, I should do a rock, paper, scissors tier list. That's coming. That's coming. Rock, paper, scissors tier list. And I'm going to set out all of the rock factions, all of the scissors factions, all of the papers factions. And then I'm going to say that if you've made it to the end of the video, I'd like to give you a big triple hello and hydrate. Oh, murder me. That was great. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Really interesting results. Let me know what you think. Hashtag polite gang rise up. Goodbye.